I never believed in curses, not ghosts, not demons, and certainly not birds. If someone had told me that a single bird would eventually turn my life into a nightmare, I would have laughed and walked away. But that was before I moved to Montana, before I rented the old house at the edge of the forest, before I saw the Common Myna. My name is Mark Henderson, and what I'm about to tell you happened in the fall of 2019. At the time, I was 34 years old and working remotely as a graphic designer. I had spent most of my life living in crowded cities, surrounded by traffic, noise, and endless distractions. Eventually, I got tired of it. I wanted peace. I wanted silence. So when I found a cheap rental house outside a small Montana town, I packed my belongings and moved without hesitation. The house was exactly what I was looking for. It sat alone at the end of a gravel road. No close neighbors, no traffic, no city lights, just trees. Thousands of trees. The forest behind the property stretched farther than I could see. Even during the day, parts of it looked unusually dark. The locals rarely talked about the woods. Whenever I brought them up, people changed the subject. At first, I assumed they were simply superstitious. Every small town has its legends. I didn't pay attention. The first few weeks passed without incident. I settled into a comfortable routine. Wake up, work, cook dinner, watch television, sleep. Everything felt normal. Then October arrived, and with it came the bird. It was a cold evening. The sun was disappearing behind the trees, and the air smelled like rain. I was sitting on my front porch drinking coffee when something landed on the railing directly in front of me. A bird. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. Brown feathers, yellow legs, dark head. A Common Myna. I remember thinking it was strange. I'd never seen one in that area before. Still, I didn't think much of it. The bird stared at me. I stared back. Seconds passed, then minutes. The bird never moved. It simply watched. Its eyes seemed unusually focused, almost intelligent. I waved my hand. Nothing. I stood up. Nothing. The bird remained perfectly still. Then it opened its beak. A strange sound escaped. Not a chirp, not a screech. It sounded disturbingly human. The noise lasted less than a second. Then the bird flew away toward the forest. I should have forgotten about it, but that night I couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. They didn't look like a bird's eyes. They looked like someone's eyes. Watching, waiting, studying me. Around 2 in the morning, I woke suddenly. At first, I didn't know why. Then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. A faint knocking sound. My bedroom was on the second floor. The sound was coming from the window. Tap, tap, tap. Still half asleep, I sat up in bed. The knocking continued. Slow, patient, deliberate. A chill ran through my body. I turned toward the window. The curtains were closed. For several seconds, I simply listened. Tap, tap, tap. Something was outside. I got out of bed and approached the window. My heart was beginning to race. The sound stopped. Complete silence. Carefully pulled the curtain aside. Darkness. Nothing but darkness. The yard was empty. The trees swayed gently in the wind. I almost laughed at myself. Maybe a branch had been hitting the glass. Maybe I had imagined it. Then lightning flashed across the sky. For one brief second, the entire yard lit up, and I saw it. The Common Myna, standing on the narrow ledge outside my second floor window, watching me. Its eyes reflected the lightning. Bright, unnatural, almost red. Then darkness returned. I stumbled backward. My pulse exploded. There was no way a bird should have been standing there. No ledge, no perch, nothing to support it. Yet I had seen it clearly. The rest of the night I barely slept. When morning arrived, I convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. There always was. At least, that's what I believed back then. I went outside to inspect the area beneath the window. That's when I found the marks. 5 long scratches across the glass. Deep scratches, as if something had dragged sharp claws across the surface during the night. I stared at them for a long time. They weren't there the day before, and somehow, they didn't look like bird marks. They looked almost human. That was the first moment I felt genuine fear. Not panic, not terror, just a quiet realization that something wasn't right. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning, because over the next few days, the bird started appearing everywhere, and each time I saw it, it was getting closer. The scratches on my window bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I spent nearly an hour trying to figure out how they got there. Maybe a raccoon, maybe a tree branch, maybe some other animal, but none of those explanations felt right. The marks were too straight, too deliberate, almost as if someone had carved them into the glass. Eventually, I forced myself to stop thinking about it. I had work to do, deadlines to meet, clients waiting for designs. Life had to continue. At least that was what I told myself. But throughout the entire day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I looked toward the forest, I felt uneasy, as if something was standing among the trees. Something hidden, something observing me. That evening, I went into town to buy groceries. The town itself was small, a few hundred people at most. There was one gas station, one grocery store, one diner, and a handful of old buildings that looked like they hadn't changed in decades. While paying for my groceries, I casually mentioned the bird to the cashier. She was a woman in her 60s named Linda. "Ever see common mynas around here?" I asked. The smile disappeared from her face. Immediately, the change was so sudden that I noticed it right away. "Why?" she asked. "I've been seeing one around my house." Linda stared at me for several seconds. Then she looked toward the window, toward the distant tree line. "You should stay away from those woods." I laughed. "Because of a bird?" She didn't laugh back. "I mean it." Something about her tone unsettled me. Before I could ask another question, she quickly changed the subject. A few minutes later, I left the store, but her reaction stayed with me. It wasn't normal. She looked genuinely frightened, as if she knew something she didn't want to say, something she didn't even want to think about. That night, rain began falling shortly after sunset. Heavy rain, the kind that pounds against the roof and windows. I spent the evening watching television, trying to distract myself, trying not to think about birds, or scratches, or strange old women warning me about forests. Around 10 o'clock, I heard something hit the roof. Thump. I muted the television. Silence. Then it happened again. Thump. A few seconds later. Thump. I frowned. Probably a branch. The storm was getting stronger. But then the sounds continued. Not random. Not natural. They came at regular intervals. Almost like footsteps. Slow footsteps, walking across the roof. My stomach tightened. The house was only 2 stories high. No tree branches reached the roof, and no person could possibly be walking up there in the middle of a storm. The sounds continued for nearly 5 minutes. Then they stopped. Completely. I sat frozen on the couch, listening, waiting, nothing. Eventually, convinced myself I was overreacting. The storm had put me on edge. That was all. The storm had put me on edge. That was all. At midnight, I turned off the television and headed upstairs. The rain was still falling. The wind howled through the trees. I climbed into bed and tried to sleep. For a while, everything was quiet. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft. Distant. Almost impossible to hear. I opened my eyes. The room was dark. The voice came again, this time slightly louder. A whisper, a single word. Mark. I sat upright instantly. Every muscle in my body tensed. The voice had sounded close, very close, like someone standing in the room. I reached for the lamp beside my bed and turned it on. Nothing. The room was empty. I checked the closet. Empty. The hallway. Empty. Every room upstairs. Empty. I was alone, yet I knew I had heard something. I knew it. Eventually, exhaustion won. I returned to bed, but sleep never truly came. The next morning, I found the first feather. It was sitting on my front porch. A black feather, long, glossy, perfectly intact. I picked it up. A strange feeling washed over me. For a moment, I could have sworn the feather felt warm, almost alive. I quickly dropped it, trying not to think about how ridiculous that sounded. Then I noticed another feather, and another, and another. They formed a trail, leading toward the forest. I followed them with my eyes. The feathers disappeared into the trees. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Something moved between the trunks. A shadow, gone before I could focus on it. Then I saw the bird, the common myna, perched on a dead branch at the edge of the woods, watching me. Again, always watching. For several seconds neither of us moved. Then the bird tilted its head, slowly, almost curiously, and for the briefest moment, I had the terrifying feeling that it was smiling. Not like a bird, like a person pretending to be a bird. I looked away, only for a second. When I looked back, it was gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. That night would be the first time I saw something standing among the trees, and it would change everything. By the third day, I had stopped trying to convince myself that everything was normal. The bird was appearing too often. Every morning, I saw it somewhere on the property, sometimes on the fence, sometimes on the roof, sometimes perched on the mailbox at the end of the gravel road, always watching, always silent, and somehow, always seemed to be looking directly at me. No matter where I stood, no matter what I was doing, the feeling of being watched never left. It followed me everywhere. That evening, a thick fog rolled in from the forest. By sunset, visibility had dropped to less than 50 feet. The trees behind my house looked like dark shapes floating inside a sea of gray. I locked every door, closed every curtain, and tried to focus on work. Around 8 o'clock, my internet suddenly stopped working. I checked the router. Everything seemed fine. Still no connection. A few minutes later, my phone lost service too. No bars, no signal, nothing. That had never happened before. I walked to the kitchen window and looked outside. The fog had grown even thicker. The forest was almost invisible. Now, only vague shadows remained. And then I saw it. Something standing near the tree line. At first, I thought it was a tree, a strange shaped trunk. But then it moved, very slowly, very slightly. My heart skipped a beat. The shape was tall, extremely tall, at least 7 feet, maybe taller. It stood completely still between two trees, watching the house, watching me. I couldn't make out any details through the fog, only a silhouette, a dark, human-shaped silhouette. I stared at it, trying to understand what I was seeing. Maybe a hunter, maybe a hiker, maybe someone playing a prank. Then lightning flashed across the sky. For a fraction of a second, the entire yard lit up, and I saw the figure clearly. It wasn't wearing clothes. It wasn't carrying anything, and it wasn't standing on the ground. Its feet were several inches above it, floating. The lightning vanished. Darkness returned. I stumbled backward. My pulse exploded. "No," I whispered. "No way." I rushed back to the window. The figure was gone. Nothing remained except fog. I stood there for nearly a minute, waiting, watching, but it never reappeared. Eventually, I forced myself away from the window. There had to be an explanation. There always was. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Because for the first time, I had seen something that simply didn't make sense. Something impossible. And the worst part, I wasn't sure it had been alone. Around 10 o'clock, I heard scratching, a faint sound coming from outside. Skr, skr, skr. I froze. The noise was coming from the side of the house. Slowly, I grabbed a flashlight. The scratching continued. Skr, skr, skr. I moved toward the nearest window. My hands were shaking. The sound stopped. Silence. Then, scrrr. Something dragged across the wall outside. A long, violent scrape. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. The yard was empty. The fog drifted quietly through the darkness. No animals. No people. No movement. Then I pointed the flashlight toward the forest, and my blood turned to ice. Dozens of small reflections stared back at me. Eyes, hundreds of feet away, scattered among the trees, watching. At first, I thought they belonged to animals. Then one of them moved, and another, and another. They were birds. Dozens of birds, maybe hundreds, all sitting silently in the trees, all staring toward my house, toward me. Their eyes reflected the flashlight like tiny glowing embers. I backed away from the window immediately. Something was very wrong. I knew it. Every instinct in my body screamed it. That night, I pushed a chair under my bedroom door. I don't know why. A chair wouldn't stop anything, but it made me feel slightly safer. At around 17 a.m., I woke suddenly. No noise, no dream, just a feeling, a terrible feeling. The room felt colder than before, much colder. I checked the thermostat. The temperature had dropped nearly 20 degrees. A strange smell filled the air. Wet earth, rotting leaves, forest smell, as if the woods had somehow entered the house. Then I noticed something. My bedroom door was open, just a few inches. The chair I had wedged beneath the handle was lying on its side across the floor. My heart nearly stopped. I knew I had locked that door. I knew it. Slowly I looked toward the hallway. Darkness, complete darkness. Then I heard it, a whisper, coming from downstairs. Soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. Someone was speaking, and they were saying my name. Mark. A pause. Then again. Mark. And then a third time. Closer, much closer. Mark. I sat frozen in bed, unable to move, unable to breathe, because this time, the voice didn't sound human. It sounded like dozens of voices speaking together, and somewhere among those voices, I thought I heard the Common Myna. I remained frozen in bed. Every muscle in my body felt locked in place. The voice had come from downstairs. There was no doubt about it, and it had said my name, not once, not twice, 3 times, each time sounding closer than before. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I sat there staring at the dark hallway outside my bedroom, waiting, listening. My pulse pounded in my ears. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. Then I heard it, a soft creak, downstairs, followed by another, and another, slow footsteps. Someone was walking through my house. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. No signal. Still nothing. I tried calling emergency services anyway. The call failed instantly. My hands trembled. I looked toward the baseball bat I kept beside the closet. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all I had. Slowly, I picked it up. The footsteps continued. Creak, 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 moving across the first floor, not rushing, not sneaking, just walking, as if whoever was down there knew the house belonged to them. A cold wave of fear rolled through me. I forced myself to stand. Every instinct told me to stay where I was, to lock the door and wait for morning. But another part of me needed answers. I couldn't sit there forever. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the hallway. The house was silent again. No footsteps, no whispers, nothing, only darkness. I switched on the hallway light. It flickered once, twice, then stayed on. The yellow glow stretched down the staircase. Everything looked normal, too normal. I slowly descended the stairs, one step at a time. The wooden steps groaned beneath my weight. The sound seemed unnaturally loud. At the bottom, I paused. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. The dining room was empty. No signs of anyone. No open doors. No broken windows. Nothing. I almost felt relieved. Almost. Then I noticed the back door. It was standing open, just a few inches. My stomach dropped. I knew I had locked it before going to bed. I checked it twice, maybe 3 times. Yet now it was open. A cold breeze drifted into the house, along with the smell of wet earth and forest leaves. The same smell I'd noticed upstairs. I approached carefully. The darkness beyond the doorway seemed deeper than normal. The porch light should have illuminated the yard, but somehow the darkness swallowed everything. I couldn't see more than a few feet. Then I heard a fluttering sound. Wings. Dozens of wings. Somewhere outside. I pointed my flashlight into the yard. At first, I saw nothing. Then the beam moved across the grass, and I froze. Black feathers, hundreds of them, scattered across the lawn, covering almost every inch of ground, as though an entire flock of birds had exploded in my yard. I stepped outside. The night felt unnaturally cold. My breath formed clouds in front of me. The flashlight beam swept across the grass. More feathers. Everywhere. Then I noticed something strange. The feathers weren't scattered randomly. They formed a pattern, a circle, a massive circle around the house. I followed it with the light. The ring completely surrounded the property. My heart pounded harder. Someone had placed them there. They had to. But who and why? Then I heard a sound behind me, a soft click. I spun around. The back door had closed by itself. I rushed toward it. Locked. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. I pulled harder. Still nothing. Panic surged through me. I pounded on the door. Come on. The lock wouldn't budge. And then I heard another sound. From the forest. A single bird call. The Common Myna. I turned slowly toward the tree line. The fog had returned. Thicker than before. The flashlight barely penetrated it. For several seconds, I saw nothing. Then two red points appeared among the trees. Eyes. At least, they looked like eyes. They hovered motionless in the darkness, watching me. The moment I focused on them, they disappeared. My heart nearly stopped. Then the bird called again, closer this time. A harsh, unnatural sound, almost like laughter. I scanned the trees desperately, and that's when I saw the figure again. The tall silhouette, standing between the trunks, perfectly still, watching. Even through the fog, I could tell it was closer than before, much closer. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. The figure slowly lifted one arm and pointed directly at me. At that exact moment, every bird in the forest erupted into noise. Thousands of wings exploded into the air. The sound was deafening. The sky became a storm of black feathers. I stumbled backward, fell onto the grass, dropped the flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the yard, and for one terrifying second, it illuminated something standing only a few feet away. A Common Myna, but not normal. Its eyes looked almost human, and its head was tilted at an impossible angle. The bird stared directly into my eyes. Then it opened its beak, and in a voice that sounded unmistakably human, it said, "He remembers you." The flashlight went out. Everything plunged into darkness, and somewhere in the woods, something started moving toward the house.